For more than 50 years now, there's one story that has pretty much defined the American crime epic. It's become a massive cultural touchstone. So today, we're going to peel back the layers of Francis Ford Coppola's Godfather Trilogy. We're going to really dig in and try to understand its genius and, why it's about so much more than just a bunch of gangsters. I mean, it is really hard to overstate their impact. By any account, these films aren't just good movies. They are absolutely monumental. They didn't just tell a story. They literally changed the language of filmmaking. And they've seeped into, well, every corner of American culture, from high art all the way down to our everyday conversations.
And yeah, they were blockbusters in the truest sense of the word. We're talking about a trilogy that has pulled in over $1 billion. That's billion with a B, which just proved that something could be profound, complex art, and also a massive commercial hit. I mean, the first two films both won Best Picture at the Oscars. That's incredible.
But look, the real question here isn't about the money or the awards, right? It's about their staying power. Why do we still keep coming back to the Corleone family? What is it about these films that make them feel just as powerful today as they did way back in the 70s? Well, let's dive in and find out. Okay, so the first piece of the puzzle, the first key to the whole trilogy's brilliance, is how it took a genre that everyone knew, the crime film, and just completely flipped it on its head, reinventing it from the inside out. This right here, this is where the magic really happens. See, it wasn't just another mob story. What Coppola and Puzo did was they fused that crime narrative with this huge, sweeping family saga, and that's what gave it the emotional weight of a true epic. And that created this fundamental shift. I mean, think about classic crime films for a second. They're usually about a gangster versus the cops, right? But in The Godfather, the law is almost a non-factor. It's either corrupt or totally useless. The real war is internal, a battle between rival families. So the whole focus shifts from some individual outlaw's rebellion to a dynasty's fight for survival.
And you know what? This shift is exactly what gave these films their universal appeal. All of a sudden, it's not just about crime anymore. It's about things we can all understand. The immense pressure of a father's legacy, the unbreakable bonds and the brutal betrayals that happen inside a family, and that painful transition from old traditions to a new, ruthless world.
But hey, a great story is one thing. It's not enough on its own. It's really about how you tell that story. And that's where Coppola's unique vision and his specific directorial choices come in. That's what gave this trilogy its unbelievable power. So Coppola's whole style can pretty much be summed up in one fancy-sounding term, mise en scène. But really, all it means is he wasn't interested in flashy camera moves. Instead, he created this transparent style, where the drama just sort of unfolds naturally, right there in the frame. Everything you see, from how an actor moves to the shadows in a room, it all served the story. So let's break down his key techniques, okay? First, he pulled these legendary tour de force method performances from his actors. Then, his camera work was super subtle. It was all about revealing the drama, not shoving it in your face. And the use of light and shadow, that wasn't just to look cool. It was deeply symbolic. And the dialogue, wow. It felt so authentic, it seemed like it was coming directly from that world, all while the film maintained this epic, almost operatic scale. And you can see this style perfectly at work in Michael Corleone's horrifying transformation. Coppola guided Al Pacino's performance just step by step, taking him from that young war hero who says, "That's my family, Kay, not me," to a cold, calculating, absolute monster. This quote here, it captures that journey perfectly. In a way, you could say the direction is the story. Okay, but let's zoom out for a second, because these films were about so much more than just one family. They were holding up this dark, twisted mirror to the country that made them, becoming a powerful allegory for America itself. Yeah, because when you get down to it, at its deepest level, this trilogy isn't just about the mafia. It's an investigation of the American dream itself. And it asks a really disturbing question: what is the true cost of achieving power and wealth in America? And you gotta remember the context here. These films landed right at the middle of the Vietnam era. It was a time of deep, deep cynicism about American institutions. You already had films like Bonnie and Clyde getting audiences to root for the outlaw. Well, The Godfather took that a giant leap further. By making the laws seem totally corrupt and irrelevant, it basically suggested that the entire social order was rotten to the core. And this is where the analogy gets really clear. The Corleone family business, think about it, violent takeovers, ruthlessly getting rid of the competition, an obsession with dominating the market. It becomes a dark, twisted mirror for the predatory nature of unchecked American capitalism.
And this critique just gets deeper and deeper as the trilogy goes on. In the first two movies, you watch the family's soul just corrode as it climbs to the top. It completely strips away any romance from that self-made man myth. And then you get to part three, and the film is basically arguing that there's no difference between the mob and the so-called legitimate world of Vatican banks and international corporations. The corruption is absolute, total. All right, so finally, we get to what might be the most fascinating layer of the whole legacy. How these films didn't just tell a story. They actively created a modern American myth.
See, the films did way more than just show us the mafia. They completely reshaped its entire mythology. They took what was once the secret, hidden code and basically blew the doors off of it, turning it into a public spectacle for a huge mass audience.
And to really get their impact, you have to see how the mafia myth itself evolved. It starts out as this old Sicilian code of honor. Then, in America, it becomes a story about immigrant struggle. After that, pop culture grabs hold and turns it into a commodity. But it's the Godfather films that was the decisive moment. They created the definitive, modern myth that we all know today. And this part is just wild. The myth became so powerful that art literally started to influence real life. The films and the books actually changed how the mafia saw itself. They started turning their own secret history into a kind of performance based on the very media version of them that Coppola had created. So, when you put it all together, the reinvention of a genre, the incredible cinematic artistry, the deep political allegory, and the sheer myth-making, what are you left with? Well, you arrive at the trilogy's absolutely devastating core message. At its heart, what this entire trilogy is really about is the moral cost of power. Every single decision, every act of violence, it's all weighed on a moral scale. And the debt is always paid in blood and soul. You know, the entire tragic arc of the Corleone family, and especially of Michael, can be summed up perfectly by this idea. The higher you climb to power, the more your honor has to decline. The very act of getting to the top forces you to abandon every single piece of yourself that you once valued. And that leaves us with one last, really haunting question. When you watch Michael Corleone die old and completely alone, stripped of everything he ever fought to protect, you have to ask yourself, are we just watching the fall of one man? Or are we watching a cautionary tale about the very dream he represents? An American dream whose pursuit can utterly destroy the very things that make life worth living in the first place.